In Whitney Meyer's article, Perceptions of People with Disabilities and Their Families About Segregated and Inclusive Recreation Involvement, the article states how families that have children with disabilities tend to choose a secluded environment that would suit their athletes or their child's competition level and skill. While the Special Olympics would provide a place to develop their skills, it also created an environment for the athletes to make friendships with the athletes and the coaches as well. When I immediately arrived at the Special Olympics, I became very good friends with an athlete named Andy, who was one of our older athletes. He would always talk to me about how the San Francisco Giants were doing each weekend, or the Oakland A's. And at the end of the season, he gave me an Oakland A's schedule, so I could go to a game, and he would always stay with him. When I decided what I was going to do with my CBSL project, I thought about what the biggest issue was at hand and how I was going to positively impact the situation. I realized that most of the athletes were or had at one point experienced exclusion, particularly in sports. I knew how much sports had given to me, such as self-confidence, friendships, and experiences that last a lifetime. I wanted to create the same opportunity for the athletes. Through volunteering, I was able to help keep the basketball practices running smoothly and effectively so the athletes could gain the most out of each practice. This created positive environments where the athletes could develop lasting relationships. One of the strongest relationships is Oscars and Pacos. They always immediately greet each other with a hug or a high five, and they start shooting around together. They also never separate in drills. In Scott Medell's Student Perceptions About Sports of Persons with Disabilities, he states how people find the athletes dependent rather than independent, in need of protection, and a burden rather than an asset. When I first began coaching, I was cautious on how to instruct the athletes to perform a task or a drill. However, I immediately began to realize that it was not necessary, and I could explain the drill to them just like anyone else. It would just require a little bit more time and patience. For example, Shay, one of the athletes, has a full-time job at Whole Foods, and she is able to drive herself to and from work. For the past 5 years, I have been volunteering with the Special Olympics. I have made numerous connections with multiple athletes, but one of my strongest connections is with an athlete named Kevin. Kevin is always cheerful and always would greet me with a hug and a handshake. He was incredibly helpful with other athletes, most of the time sacrificing his practice time to help someone else with their skill. Kevin is the athlete that truly encompasses the spirit of what the Special Olympics is about, and he is the athlete that all the athletes look up to. And what's your favorite part of soccer?
Scoring goals and passing to my teammates so then they could score goals.
And what do you do to get ready for the games?
Listen to my music.
What music do you listen to?
Any kind. Bone Thugs and Harmony, Biggie, any kind.
Between basketball and soccer, what's your favorite?
Soccer.
Soccer, why?
I could run around. I could be me.
The summer before senior year, I began thinking about what I wanted to do for my CBSL. I came with the idea of taking the team to UC Berkeley to play at halftime of a basketball game. While the practices did help with self-confidence, I believe there had to be an event that would allow them to reach another level. And this was one reason I wanted to put together the UC Berkeley trip. Many of my friends and I have had the experience of the lights beaming down on us during a sporting event. It was moments like those that helped me gain more self-confidence, and I believe would do the same for the athletes. In August of 2014, I reached out to UC Berkeley and spoke with the director of ticket sales, David Cow, and began discussing my idea. He told me it was definitely a possibility and that I would need to speak with them later in the season to make sure they would have availability. Afterwards, I began gathering all the resources I could. Mr. Smith, an English teacher at Cardinal Newman, reached out to me about setting up an online funding website. Our initial goal was to raise $1,750 in order to pay for bus, tickets, as well as box lunches for the event. By the end of the deadline for my site, I had reached $3,500, so it was time to figure out what we were going to do with the extra money. I was able to now buy the athletes' jerseys, shooting sleeves, and customized water bottles with their names on it. I was also able to pay for the goggles for the swim team, as well as $600 left over in the Newman Fund for the Special Olympics. The journey to Berkeley consisted of 4 teams, each with 5 players on it, along with 10 coaches and multiple other volunteers. When we arrived at Cal, we were greeted by Paige Maeda, a colleague of David. She escorted us to our seats in the corner of the stadium, where we were able to watch the 2 basketball teams warm up. players were cheering louder than anyone else in the stadium each time Berkeley made a shot, whether it was in the warm-ups or the game. With about 8 minutes left in the first half, the athletes and the coaches were escorted by the UC Berkeley staff to the tunnel where the players run out onto the court. Some of the players were coming up to me telling me it was the first time they had the infamous butterfly experience. They were asking me how to deal with it, and I would tell them that they are excited because they know they're going to do well and have so much fun. When the buzzer signaling halftime run, the UC Berkeley players ran out of the court and we all gave them high fives. We were welcomed with the lights, with applauses and the announcer saying, "Let's welcome the Special Olympics of Sonoma County." The lights beaming down on us truly embraced the moment. The athletes were finally able to compete in front of a real stadium full of fans that they do not know. The 6-minute game blew by and we were escorted off the court. Once we were out, Paige Maeda gifted us with the UC Berkeley shirts for each athlete. When we left the stadium, the athletes were yelling and screaming about how happy they were and that they were like celebrities now. Their enthusiasm and happiness continued the entire way home, while Darwin, one of the older athletes, came up to me on the bus and said, "Thank you for putting this together. It was an amazing experience." While one of the younger athletes named Sammy chose to give me a thank you card at a later practice. Not only was UC Berkeley an amazing environment to build self-confidence, but it also created an amazing memory for the athletes. Through volunteering with the Special Olympics, I began to understand the meaning of solidarity. I was nervous at first how I was going to approach each athlete and whether I would know how to handle each situation. However, I quickly began to learn how we are all one and relate in the same way. By supporting and caring for each athlete, in return they would give me their attention and cooperation during each drill. When I saw how hard they were trying each time they practiced, it made me want to be a better coach for them. Their skills increased because of the dedication they put into practice. I became better at explaining directions, demonstrating how all of us benefited from one another. In Romans chapter 13, verse 8 through 10, it says, "Living rightly means to love one another." I loved each opportunity I had to volunteer with the Special Olympics because I could immediately see the impact I was making. Next year I'll be attending the Santa Rosa Junior College and hopefully transferring to UC Berkeley after 2 years. I will continue to volunteer at the Special Olympics because I believe there's more that can be done. I plan to organize another UC Berkeley trip with the athletes next basketball season. It is experiences like those that will be remembered for a lifetime.
What was I supposed to high-five you about?
Day one,